Hello and welcome to another Blu-ray review. We're talking about the Jetsons, the movie. This is the Kino Lorber release from 2021, I believe. Yeah, that's the copyright on it. This is a 1990 film, which comes with a, handsome selection of features, but, is still your standard Region A, American Blu-ray with its font and everything. I would imagine the original version probably came with a slipcover with the actual original text, because that's what Kino usually do for their Blu-rays, but it's a very basic package and everything. Comes with English subtitles, which is nice. It's an 82-minute long film. It has 5.1 sound and a 2.0 stereo, even though it doesn't actually note that on the back, which is interesting. Nevertheless, let's dive into it, because it also has some special features, which is my main highlight of the package and the reason why I wanted to talk about it as a product. But yeah, so we'll talk about the audio and the video, and then we'll get into the special features. Now, what did I write down for this? Well, I can't say it's a exceptional release in terms of video and audio. Video-wise, it's got some nice detail and with very obvious layer of grain, very heavy layer of grain. With the occasional white specks and, the color and brightness, vibrancies, variations. I knew I had vibrancy in there, but it wasn't the word I was looking for. But it has a lot of variations in terms of how consistent it is with its quality. It's not the best looking picture. My praise would be that it's not riddled with DNR like a lot of animated films can be, to just get rid of like a lot of dirt and stuff and to get rid of a lot of line work, which unfortunately DNR does. But luckily this doesn't have any of that. This is just taken straight from a film print with no edits seemingly whatsoever. Given it's very clearly an old print, it has a lot of specks and dirt and all kinds of issues with it. It's not anything that I would say is egregious or completely annoying, but it's definitely not the best presentation that the film could be. If it was cleaned up, of just like without the specks and the occasional, dirt and whatever lines that occasionally come in, some occasional fluctuations on the corners. If all that was cleaned up, even if it wasn't a 4K scan, it would definitely look a bit punchier. But I think a good 2K or 4K master of this, even though whether the film really deserves one or not, I don't know, that's really up for debate. But if it got the proper restoration that it really deserves, that would be fantastic. But unfortunately, that is not the picture quality you're going to get here. But I'm not going to say it's the worst picture quality. It just looks like it's from a film print that hasn't been restored, which isn't the worst thing, but it's just not the best thing. So, yeah, I mean, you'd easily want to make the argument of, oh, well, it's going to be kind of low and cheap and whatever because it's a, Hanna-Barbera animation, but at the same time, it's not the quality of the animation that I'm being critical of here, because that is, in and of its own self, a part of the formula. If you know what Hanna-Barbera cartoons look like, you know what the movie, even though this was a theatrically released movie, will look like, but it still looks nice. It has some great sequences. There are some good music sequences. There's a lot of music sequences in this film, but there are some actual musical numbers where it becomes really trippy with its visuals, and it does look really nice. So it does have some great punch. There's a lot of good different characters, different designs, different color variations between each character. There's a whole alien race that's basically the exact little designed creature, but each one is a different color. So again, give it a good 4K scan, and that could really punch it up and make those colors really shine. The obvious, poor quality would be that there is CG animation in it, but all the CG animation is used for landscape stuff. It's buildings in space, it's big asteroids and whatever. It's the spaceships as they fly through. Occasionally, space, depends. Some scenes are completely CG, some scenes are not CG at all. It's a very amusing mix depending on how much animation the characters need to have in it. But I don't think that would be completely disrupted because it's a consistent look throughout. So there's that. Colors and textures are distinct and appropriate though, even with the contrast of the hand-drawn animation and the CG animation. So not the worst picture, but not the best. It definitely could use a better, even just a good cleanup would have been nice. But yeah, audio-wise, I was fine with the audio. I've listened to this twice now. The 5.1 is the only mix I've listened to. It has a decent array for its surround sound, mostly because you get some good musical numbers, which again fills out the surround sound pretty well. Most of the dialogue is pretty front heavy, and it sounds like the old TV show, you know. They somehow managed to keep that sound together, but at the same time it still has that kind of dated feel to it in the same bracket. It doesn't have too many, like, great uses of sound effects in reality, because it's just mostly set in space or in a factory, and occasionally they'll have things wash through, but it's mostly just the musical numbers that'll kick in and punch it up a bit. But I had no real issues with the audio. It probably could sound a bit better, but at the same time, to have the two different options of the 5.1 and the 2.0, I think is satisfactory enough. So, yeah, and, you know, I listened to it with headphones on, I listened to it in the speakers, and it sounded good in both variations. So, you know, you might need to punch it up a bit on your remote, but aside from that, it's perfectly serviceable. Special features, however, it notes an audio commentary with author/film historian Lee Gambon, as well as an audio interview with voice actor Jeff Bergman, who played George Jetson, Mr. Spacey, and a board member, as well as several theatrical trailers for other properties, including, I don't even think I saw one for this particular movie, but they had a couple in there. It had, like, I think it had a Flintstones one and Thunderbirds Are Go, so more modern stuff. Nevertheless, the audio commentary I thought was beautiful. I mostly watched it today because I'd seen this film back in March 2025. Recently enough, you know, I wanted to put it on. Easy 82-minute long film. It's fine. I'll talk about my thoughts on the film in a second, but I rewatched it mostly because, Lee Gambon I was friends with, and he passed away in May of 2024, and the last time I saw him was the day I'm actually filming this, on the 27th of April, and I kind of wanted to use this as a way to kind of commemorate that, because he loved stuff like this. He loved the old TV shows, the old animated cartoons, and his audio commentary goes into that into a lot of great detail. He talks in so much detail about the cast and the characters and what their film represents. There was a whole thing I wrote here. It pays tribute to the film, the original series, whilst detailing elements of the cast and crew, analysing certain elements and relating certain elements to other episodes of popular cartoons from the 60s through to the 90s. Lee has a deep knowledge of the show and the cast, and a deep love and appreciation for a film like this and the property that it's based on. Audio-wise, it can be a bit spotty. I listen to it with headphones on, and Lee has a habit of just having his audio sound occasionally weird. You know, sometimes he'll dip out or, you know, jump back up a bit. You know, he'll turn his head away to probably have a sip of water or something and then cut right back into it. You know, not a lot of editing put into it, mostly kind of just, not stream of consciousness, because he has this shit written down to a T. And you can tell because occasionally he'll be talking about some of the stuff that's happening on screen, then he'll divot to stuff that isn't. You know, he'll be like, okay, now let's talk about George, now let's talk about Jane, you know, and talk about certain casting choices, all these different things. But then he'll still relate things back to what's actually happening on screen. Like, oh, here's a big part with, you know, Elroy. He's playing basketball. Let's talk about Elroy as a character, you know. There's even a whole part where they move into their new space-age apartment in the new place that they're living in, and he starts talking about characters who haven't appeared on screen yet. But I'm like, oh, I know who he's talking about because I've seen the movie, which obviously is the wise way to go about it. Watch the movie before you listen to the commentary. Nevertheless, it's wonderful. He clearly loved this kind of property, and he goes into a small detail about how much he loved these shows growing up and how he loves that he can revisit them on a physical media format. And it's the kind of thing that, again, why I wanted to watch this film and why I chose this to rewatch was because the last time I saw him, he screened a thing called Stay Tuned, which was in a 12-hour marathon of TV shows. All of his own selected programming at a theatre in Melbourne, the Astor Theatre. And it was wonderful. I caught a couple of hours of it, and I had a talk with him after it, and it became the last time I saw him, the last time I talked to him even, which very unintentional, but I mean, you never know because people just die. And so I wanted to have some way of commemorating that by watching this. And now, I'm not a huge fan of the film. I only watched it like 2 months ago. I didn't love it. I thought it was fine, but I knew that his commentary would be insanely insightful, and that his passion for the TV shows especially, and how they were adapted to eventual movies, would be represented within the commentary track, and that's the reason why I listened to it, and it's exactly what I wanted out of it. But it's also just a really insanely informative commentary. For 82 minutes, Lee just... he's so fucking fast and quick and just precise with what he's talking about, but he has enough of his own flair and knows how to just div it into the right sections at the right times. Like, there's enough of his own character, whether it be just regular slip-ups of what he's saying, or how he talks about, and like segues between different, topics of conversation. It's great. It's a wonderful commentary. But if that's not all, and that's not all, you still get a 54-minute-long interview with Jeff Bergman, who, as I said, does play George Jetson, Mr. Spacey, and a board member. He had his career basically kick off huge in like the late 80s, early 90s. He replaced Mel Blanc and, what's his name? George O'Hanlon, who had both passed away whilst they were making this film. So there was about like 15 minutes of dialogue per character that hadn't been recorded yet or hadn't been finished recording. So he came in to replace them. And that's really interesting, because I've listened to his voice in a bunch of different, cartoons and animated films and all kinds of stuff. He basically does these characters now professionally, all these years later. And this is a really, really nice interview with him, of just the two of them talking about it, Lee clearly knowing so much about this kind of stuff and knowing exactly what to talk about, and Jeff having such a great, just a great vibe and a great personability in how he talks about this stuff, his relationship to Mel Blanc and how he met him when he was a kid. Just all this really interesting stuff, how he loved the shows and the characters, what it was like to step into these roles, what they both thought of the fact that this singer, pop star called Tiffany came in to do the role of Jane. Is it Jane? I feel like Judy, daughter Judy, of course. And Lee mentions that in his commentary as well, how there are even sections that were actually recorded by the original voice actor for Judy, and then most of it was cut out and replaced by this singer, and all the controversies that ensued. So it's a whole thing, but they talk about that in the interview as well. They talk about Jeff's relationship to these characters and doing animated characters for the past, 30 odd years. It's just really nice. It's a really fun conversation with the two. Again, 54 whole minutes, which covers his whole career and his love for the genre. And again, also features some trailers. But I think as a film, it's okay. I gave it 2.5 stars when I first watched it. I don't love it per se. I think it's fine. I was enough of a Jetsons fan as a kid because, you'd watch reruns as a child. I mean, Lee mentioned that in his commentary track. And that was like that with like the Flintstones. It was always reruns, even though, of course, the Flintstones was immensely more popular and much more successful. But at the same time, it's interesting seeing them kind of work into a more modern sensibility. Like, it's the kind of narrative style where they're like, oh, we're going to uplift the characters from where they're living in and put them somewhere else, and they got to deal with all that. They got a new house, new neighbors, new relationships, new friends, new lovers, for whomever character, whatever, and new work situation. It becomes a commentary on like ecological problems, because the first image of the movie is literally just the whole city filled with smog, and yet this is the future. So the future dealing with present day problems, and then how they try to move on from that. It's like, okay, we're now gonna move George into this asteroid belt, and he's gonna work there at this factory that keeps getting sabotaged, and everyone else who's worked there has been fired because of the sabotage. And it turns out because they're drilling into a rock, and the rock happens to have these native inhabitants. And so it becomes this, again, an ecological thing that the whole family gets involved with. And they have to help these, little critters from the big, capitalist tycoon who is Mr. Spacey, and he's bloody rivets. And as much as I don't think it perfectly sticks to landing, like emotionally it does, but narratively being like, oh, well these little creatures were doing guerrilla warfare and doing their form of protest by literally sabotaging this whole entire industry, only for them to become workers who work for free, I guess, and just recycle now. So it's like the positive is they recycle instead of drilling into their home, but the negative is free labor, so it becomes, I guess, recycling goods, slavery better. So it's questionable ethics-wise, but it's again that constant commentary on the capitalist system and how that kind of sucks. So yeah, and of course, still ends with your regular wrap-up of all the characters say goodbye and they go back home to live their lives as it was before. So yeah, it is a finality for a lot of things in some regards, like, again, George's narrative thing of, oh, I need to get promoted, but then I also want to stick it to the boss, So there's, like, different elements for each character. They've got some interesting character arcs and some interesting character dynamics. I feel like the one who's the least utilized is Jane, his wife. The thing is, it still has that appeal of, hey, it's like 50s America, but in the future. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I don't really love that atomic family narrative. It still works for itself. Like, the characters have realistic values and stuff, and at the same time, they're very empathetic. Like, George is a klutz, but at the same time, he's really trying, and, like, they all have these very humane emotions and ways about them, which is nice. So I like how the film continues that from the TV show. But I'm just like, it's fine, And even in the commentary, Lee regards this film as a musical because there are musical numbers in it where, like, Judy and two of her boyfriends, actually, she meets one guy who's a musician and then another guy who's a musician. And so they have actual musical numbers. And again, she's voiced by a musician, Tiffany. But there's also, like, songs made for the film that are just talking about the events or what the characters are dealing with. So it's really interesting that way. I'm like, I don't really ever consider that because it's such a trope in animated films, especially live action adaptations or just film adaptations of films. So, like, of TV shows and stuff. Nevertheless, it's fine. Like, I don't love it, but I think it's perfectly fine. Like, if you're a fan of the Jetsons, you'll enjoy it. If you're not accustomed to the narratives of the TV show, you might not land with the film as much. But at the same time, if you don't connect with it well enough and you get the Blu-ray, at least you'll have Lee's commentary to go through, which at least gives you a lot of historical detail about this kind of stuff. So that's nice. So as an overall, I think it's an okay product. Kino are pretty decent with at least getting a semi-decent transfer. I like that it at least gives you two different audio options, which is fine. Sure, the picture definitely needs a restoration. Get rid of all the dirt and specks and give it a proper cleanup, even if it's just a 2K master. Just something with a bit more punch and vigor for what is a pretty decent looking film. Like, sure, questionable CGI, but at the same time, it's at least consistent with what it's depicting. It's not moving, it's just still things. It's just buildings and asteroids. That's about it. It's like landscape stuff. But yeah, so picture-wise, it could have used a bit more effort. Audio-wise, I thought it was fine. I didn't have any real problems with it, but at the same time, a bit of an extra kick maybe would have helped, stronger bitrate kind of thing to give it some extra punch. But the special features is its ride home. Like, the commentary that Lee did is phenomenal. The interview as well with Jeff Bergman is really interesting. It's just really nice. So, yeah, there's definitely more that could have been added to a release like this, but at the same time, I think it's a decent enough pickup if you can get it for a decent enough price. And if you're a fan of Lee's work, I highly recommend it. And if you're a fan of just the Jetsons in general or Hanna-Barbera, and you want to collect the little physical, it's not a bad way to go. It still is Region A, US region disc, but at the same time, that didn't stop me from getting it. So, yeah. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down below, if you like the movie or if you like the release, and see you next time. Adios.